everybody. My name is Chris Collenette. I'm the chairperson of the Ireland-Canada Business Association. We're very pleased, in association with TD Securities, to be hosting this briefing with the Honourable Frank McKenna. In terms of housekeeping, it would be wonderful if you could turn off your microphones. Feel free to keep your cameras on or off as you deem wish. Just briefly, in terms of background in the ICBA, for some of those who aren't familiar, we were first established in 1978, so just over 40 years old, in connection with the Canadian Embassy here. We enjoy a long and mutual beneficial relationship with. Since 2015, we have seen our membership more than double to over 100 members. This, of course, is in line with CETA, it's aligned with Brexit. Since that time, the FDI of Canadian firms in Ireland has increased substantially. There's now somewhere in the area of 15,000 jobs linked to the 70 or so operational companies here in Ireland. And exports to Canada this last year from Ireland totaled about 2.4 billion euros, which would have supported about another 25,000 jobs. So I'd now like to introduce Mr. McKenna. So for those of you joining from Canada, he really does not need an introduction. For those of you from Ireland, I suppose there's only one way to describe Frank McKenna, and that is as a giant of Canadian politics and business, probably for the last 30 or so years. He's a lawyer by training. He's first elected as an MNA in New Brunswick in 1982. In 1985, he became leader of the Liberal Party in New Brunswick. And then in 1987, he won every seat in the province. So that would be a feat that is likely, I think we were just chatting beforehand, unparalleled in Canadian history, but also probably in any other Western democracy. After 10 years as premier, which he actually said he was only going to serve for 10 years when we originally showed his ambitions. He practiced law with McInnes Cooper and Osler's Harcourt in Canada. He was a member of the advisory group of the Carlisle Group, member of the advisory board of the Carlisle Group, and chair of Canada West Global Communications Corporation. He was often touted as a future Prime Minister of Canada. However, he returned to serve as a public servant as Ambassador to the United States. And since departing as ambassador, he has served as deputy chair of TD Securities and as chair of Brookfield Asset Management. I had the pleasure in about 2005 to hear Mr. McKenna speak at a dinner in downtown Toronto, which celebrated the Codfathers book, which is a book about Atlantic Canadian ingenuity and celebrating the other leaders of industry, the titans of industry from Atlantic Canada. And I hadn't really realized it then, but that story of Atlantic Canadian success, that entrepreneurship, could very much be an Irish story. And there's no, and of course it makes total sense given the impact and the history and the amount of Irish people who were part of Atlantic Canada and have been part of the Atlantic Canadian culture for many years. So I suppose with that, I'd just like to say to Mr. McKenna, you're very welcome. I'd like to thank Kate Hickey and FOLA for their help in arranging this event. I should say, as someone with an Irish background, Mr. McKenna, maybe you could sort of tell us what it means to you to be Irish. I see you're wearing the green shirt today for TD Bank and Ireland.
Yeah, well, look, thanks, Chris, and thanks to all the organizers, and thanks for all the supporters of the ICBA. So, yeah, I mean, I'm just very conscious of the fact that I'm Irish. It may not have just come from the old country, but very Irish. My family are from County Monaghan, more specifically Emmyvale, and I think more specifically the barony of Truha. And so we go back a lot. Cousin Willie, who was a local politician there, became a friend, and as a result of that, we formed a twinning relationship between County Monaghan and the Miramichi, where I ended up having my political seat, and that twinning relationship continues to this day. And the Miramichi challenges St. John and considering itself as Canada's most Irish city. So we got a lot of Irish around us. Our family are deeply conscious of being Irish. I had a McKenna married to a McManus. They little places like Waterford and Piccadilly, and I was raised in large part by my grandparents, and I was conscious every day of the evening ritual where we would say the rosary from beginning to end, at which time we turn on the Irish Hour, which we could get in on radio and listen to the Gypsy Rover start off the Irish Hour, and that was the way our life was. So I was deeply conscious of that. And by the way, the Miramichi that I represented politically is also the home of Kevin Vickers, who is the ambassador to Ireland, and I know who was instrumental in creating a lot of the vigor in the Irish Canada Business Association. So we got a lot of linkages, a lot of really good linkages. And by the way, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention my wife is more Irish than I am. Her family, the Creans are from County Donegal, and the O'Friels are from County Donegal. And we went back to her ancestral home, which was in Castlefin in County Donegal just a couple of years ago. And at the same time, I went back to County Monaghan and brought my brother back with me, my two sons, and my grandson. So we're planted pretty deep.
So, and my understanding is, I think at one point, New Brunswick was actually going to be called New Ireland. That didn't stick for some reason, but it sounds like it probably should have.
Well,
so I guess given
population were from Ireland, so we had a good number.
So given that Irish background and heritage, it must for you be somewhat of an honor to be involved with two Canadian companies that have such a strong footprint here in Ireland. Obviously, TD Bank, or TD Securities, so it's an association we're hosting this event today, and also Brookfield Asset Management, who own a number of investments here.
Yeah, look, very much so. Sometimes I wonder about the honor part. I was checking into a hotel one day, and Peter Sutherland was checking in next to me, and when he heard my name, he said, "McKenna." He said, "I bet you're from County Monaghan." I said, "Yeah, I guess we are." He said, "You're one of the only McKennas that's out of jail at the present time." Anyway, that was my introduction. But yes, BAM has a big footprint in Ireland, and that'll continue to grow. We've got probably 400 or 500 megawatts of renewables there. Of course, we've owned Imagine, which became very important during the pandemic, a rural broadband provider. Inver Energy is another one of the companies that we have there. And so we've got a lot of interest there. And of course, we own Center Park. So once this thing all clears up, many people may want to visit Center Park. As for TD has been in Ireland for decades, but is now really ramping up. This is going to be our European center, and we're approaching 100 jobs, and I suspect that will continue to grow. This will be an important hub for us that we're pleased. And I'd be remiss if I didn't mention another very close association from New Brunswick. The Irving family is very invested in Ireland and bought the Whitegate refinery and Top Oil. So we got a lot of connections.
That's right. And I suppose some of the decision behind moving more of the bank's operations to Dublin was really a response to Brexit at the time. Anyway, I believe at the time the managing director said, "Look, we can't wait and see what falls out." Given recent developments, how do you think that was a wise move, as you want to continue to access the European Union post Brexit?
Yeah, I think it was a wise move, Chris. Look, there's 3 or 4 compelling reasons. One, we had a presence, we had a footprint in Dublin. We have a commonality of language. We have a commonality of culture. We have a legal system that we understand and embrace, and a taxation system that's accommodating. And people want it to be there. At the end of the day, you have to pick a place where people want to be. And people really liked Ireland, really liked Dublin, really wanted to be there. I'm not going to go through the names of some other European places, but they were not as popular a choice when it came time to sending employees. So this has been a very popular decision within our bank.
Well, I'm sure that's music to the ears of Kevin Ahern, who's the managing director of TD Securities here and has joined us. And and I know is instrumental in securing you today. So that's great. And of course, TD has a substantial footprint in the United States as well. I think you've got a subsidiary with over 1,200 branches. No doubt you've been watching the developments in the United States recently. As a former Canadian ambassador to Washington, perhaps you could reflect on those and how things are going to impact Canada. I think it would be safe to say that your, let's see how to put it, your worst day as ambassador to Washington is likely better than the best day that Mr. McNaughton had during the last 4 years
there. Yeah, look, it's been a circus ride, as somebody said. Mr. Trump is like a bull who brings his own china shop with him, and that's the way it felt. There was a lot of breakage. Let's put it that way. Even with Canada, which has been an historic ally and neighbor and share a border of thousands of miles, we were treated very shambolically by the president with threatening tariff wars and using national security rules to engage in tariff wars in steel and aluminum and insulting our prime minister and ministers. It was fraught. Let's just put it that way. It was, people had to be on their toes all the time. So it's a very difficult relationship. But let me just comment on the United States, because we live next to it, we watch it. The whole world has been transfixed at what is going on there. It's the world's greatest soap opera. And there are a lot of concerning features about it. The cleavages that have created the events of the last 2 or 3 months haven't gone away. And if anything, President Trump has taken a pattern that was emerging of polarization and dramatically escalated it to the point now where just this week, I think it was the FBI or Homeland Security indicated the greatest threat was domestic terrorism, and that there was a real apprehension of danger to the United States from armed groups. And what happened in the Capitol on January the 6th, for a proud country, has to be one of the most horrific events in history. You go back over 100 years before the White House or the Capitol was attacked. So this is hugely symbolic. It was brought about directly. Lawyers can argue whether it's a direct chain of causation or an indirect chain of causation, but the president refusing to accept an election victory by Biden that by any standards was overwhelming, and by any objective standard was run with great integrity, refusing to accept that result, declaring victory on election night, and then encouraging through the social media, which he has taken extraordinary advantage of, hundreds of thousands, millions, tens of millions of followers to fight the results. And these people came to Washington to support the president in trying to prevent the democratic exercise of power. Make no mistake about it. The question of whether he incited violence or whether that was the natural result, that'll be up for other tribunals to decide. But all that to say that the result has been a large victory by a new president, Joe Biden, that is not accepted by a big percentage of the American population as a result of the president refusing to concede. For many Americans, tens of millions, Joe Biden is an illegitimate president. So, so the seeds are sown for a very difficult period of time, in my view. And I think Biden will need all of his considerable Irish skills at reconciliation to try to bring the warring elements together.
Yes, and let's all hope that does take place. I suppose from a Canadian perspective, I think it's safe to say most people on this call, hopefully all of them, welcome President Biden's election, as did a number of Canadians, hopefully the vast majority. But we did see last week him signing the executive order canceling the Keystone XL pipeline project. And this will follow on my next question. Do you think we're looking at perhaps some hangovers from the Trump administration, from the American First policies, or do you think that we can expect that from a Canadian-American perspective, the relationship will go back to a normality anyway, since Mr. Trump's left?
Yeah, Chris, great question. I think it'll become more normal, and more normal is a relationship that still has lots of issues. It's the largest relationship in the world, with $2 billion transacted every day, almost $1 trillion Canadian dollars, I guess, in the space of a year, 400,000 people crossing the border every day. So inevitably there will be lots of issues, and there will be, but the tone will be so entirely different. It'll be much more respectful, even warm and collegiate. And that started already with Trudeau and Biden having the first conversation that that Biden had with the foreign leader. Keystone XL was not unexpected. I was on the other side of that trade. I think it is good for Canada, good for the United States. But Obama refused to sign the presidential permit, and Biden ran on a platform pledging that it would be torn up the day he was elected. So we shouldn't be surprised or shocked that he did what he said he would do. I also think politically that he's got a very strong and very energized base of his party that are environmentalists that are opposed to that. And I think that he really had to react to the energy from that part of his party, or else he'd be going through a bitter debate. So that's behind us in a way now in the rearview mirror. And so he did us a favor in a sense, in that we're not going to be consumed for years and months fighting that battle. But we still have lots of battles to fight. Softwood lumber hasn't gone away. We think in Canada that if he'll fix the WTO appeal process, which Trump broke by not appointing judges, we can get to a just result better and quicker. I think that if he's got a more civil dialogue with China around Huawei and other issues, and the possible deferred prosecution of Meng Wanzhou, that could lead to Canada being able to release the two Michaels who are in jail in China and see resumption of normality between China and Canada. But we're going to have to fight Buy American provisions, which is a favorite of the Democratic Party, and some inherent protectionist instincts that they have, and hope we can overcome them. But Biden has agreed to talk to our Prime Minister again in the next month, or have a visit or get together, and so that, you know, we've got a dialogue, a conversation, which we didn't have with the previous administration, and that's true not just for him but the people around him. We were facing with people like Peter Navarro and Pompeo and Andrew Miller and all kinds of people that we had nothing in common with. In fact, in many ways, they were hostile to our interests. So it'll be a much better dialogue, but our ambassadors are going to be on their toes. There'll be lots of issues.
So well, that's great. The chairman of a law firm I work with, Philip Lee, has texted me to tell me my sound isn't great, so I'm going to speak a little louder. I hope that's all right. In many respects, Ireland has been in a similar boat, not a less hostile boat, but a similar boat with the uncertainties around Brexit. So for the last 4 years, I mean, here we are, Canada and Ireland, both smaller populations than our neighbors, who are our main trading partners, both of which taking moves to more protectionist trade approaches over the last couple of years. Again, I mean, maybe you could reflect a little bit on how you see Brexit playing out now that there is a interim agreement. We note that Canada and the United Kingdom have come to an interim agreement on a continued continuity agreement between the two countries. And as you're aware, the Irish Canada Business Association, along with the Canadian Embassy and many others here, are working hard to ensure CETA is passed through the Irish, through the Dáil and the Oireachtas here. I mean, perhaps you could reflect on some of those. Will we be returning to that type of normality over in this side of the pond as well?
Yeah, there are very interesting parallels between Ireland and Canada. And I would just note that that Mark Carney, who actually works with us at Brookfield now, heading up our Green Transition Fund, was pointed out as being very helpful to Ireland back in the financial crisis when he helped to obtain IMF support. So there's a long history of friendship, a very, very close friendship. And it is quite startling the extent to which both countries are reasonably small, middling powers next to giants, and have to make our way in that background. I think the dynamic has changed a lot. Just to clear myself, I thought Brexit was a mistake, but it's reality, so there's not much we can do about it. We similarly went through almost a tearing up of NAFTA, which I think would have been a huge mistake, but things are back to normal. Again, I'll declare myself. I'm a fan of international trade. I'm a fan of the principle that by broadening the base of trade, that you lift up countries and people who otherwise would have been trapped in poverty forever. And over the last 20 years, tens of millions of jobs have been created. Millions, hundreds of millions of people have been removed from poverty. Countries have been lifted up as a result of having trading relationships. And the rising tide has lifted all boats. All of humanity has been better off. Now, that doesn't mean every individual has been, and therein lies the rub, and people like Trump exploit that, or Nigel Lafarge, they exploit that. But as a general population, we've all been enriched by this. And I think it's important that we tend those relationships. It's really important for Ireland that it came out in pretty good shape. And it bothered me that Trump and Peter Bannon and people like that were so for Brexit and the breakup of the European Union with the UK. I could never understand that. But now you've got somebody in Joe Biden who would have been much more on the other side of that trade, and much more interested in keeping the parties together, and much more interested in making sure that Ireland was protected in the course of the negotiations. So I think we're all in a better place today. It's my fervent hope, Chris, that CETA gets ratified by Ireland. I understand some of the internal politics within the Green Party, and I respect it. There's a question as to whether or not the original governing mandate included CETA as one of the items to be agreed upon. And there is some anxiety about the investor state provisions, but having been up against the United States and a trade deal over a long period of time, the investor state rules are very important and to protect the trading relationship. And so I'm hoping that Ireland will see its way through to ratification. Again, there's nothing wrong with active discussion and even dissension and the power of ideas being debated. But I hope at the end of the day that we get this done, because what it does is, it basically regulates tariff-free trade between two massive trading partners, and that's a very good thing.
Thank you, and we hope that is the case as well. I suppose you've answered my last question, and I've seen a number of questions starting to come in, and I encourage all the participants today to please, if you have a question for Mr. McKenna, put it into the chat. I guess my last question was really this. I mean, we are all, the entire world, going to be dealing with a post-COVID economy in the next 12 to 18 months, perhaps longer. I guess what I would be hopeful for is these liberalized trade agreements, as Canada has advanced and other blocs have advanced. Are we able to trade our way out of a potential long type of economic slump? I mean, is this not something that we should really all be on the same page on?
Chris, that's a brilliant question. And I'm going to start by setting it up by saying one of the things that I welcome so much about a new Biden presidency is the return to multilateral leadership. As Trump systematically was pulling out of the Paris Accords and the Iranian Comprehensive Treaty, pulling away from WHO at a time when we desperately needed all hands on deck, pulling out of TPP, just pulling away from all of these WTO, all of these multilateral agencies that have helped guide the world. The world has drifted, if I can put it that way, and regional power centers have opened up and all kinds of bad things. I think everybody who looks at this pandemic and the financing of it, some $17 trillion poorer we are as a result of all of this, realizes there's only one solution to dealing with it, and that is to grow our way out of it. We're not going to be able to cut our way out of a hole of this magnitude. We're not going to be able to tax our way out of it. We have to grow faster than the rate of interest on the debt. And we do have a very low cost debt. So that's a real possibility. But one of the ways to turbocharge that is to reinvigorate international trade, which almost automatically increases the GDP of the countries involved. And so we encourage it in Canada. Stephen Polis, who was our former bank governor, gave a speech last week saying, and this should be surprised that he would say this, but it's so common sense. The two things that we need to get out of this hole in Canada are national daycare, so that we can expand the workforce, and secondly, breaking down interprovincial barriers, which would immediately increase the GDP of the country. Now, if that's true of Canada, that's true of the world as well. So other conversations I've had, people haven't noted that the way that you have, but I think the quicker that we get to a world where we look after each other, where we have each other's back, where we're not beggaring thy neighbor, where we're actively growing together, I think that's going to be a much better world for all of us.
And of course, greater economic integration means less likelihood of military action against each other, which is
Always has.
The whole point behind the EU in the beginning. But anyway, I see some questions coming in. So Sean Finley, who's with Geoscience Ireland and is a long-term member of the associations, asked, interesting to see a pivot by some Canadian companies from traditional fossil fuels to geothermal energy. Geoscience Ireland is leading an EU consortium studying geothermal industries, including a telecom later today with Natural Resources Canada and Geotherm Canada. Oil and gas skill sets are readily transferable to geothermal. And I mean, I suppose that's a good point. We are looking at different sources of energy. I even saw before Christmas that Minister Regan announced a new policy with regards to aspirations for 25% of hydrogen as a fuel source in Canada by 2050. Perhaps you could respond and talk a little bit about the move from traditional fossil fuels to the more renewable sector. I know it's something that Brookfield is obviously heavily invested in.
Yeah, I think it's a great question, and it's more than a move now; it's a tsunami. It's incredible how quickly society has moved en masse, embracing ESG principles, and particularly around the transition to a greener economy. And of course, Brookfield, with Mark Carney's leadership, from County Mayo, I might add, all three of his grandfathers came from County Mayo. Under his leadership, we're going to be raising a massive fund to help us in the green economy. We're already one of the largest renewable companies in the world with, I don't know, the biggest portfolio of renewable power, and we're heavily involved with solar, wind, and so on. So it'll be a big event for that company, but also TD, where we've pledged to get to zero net 50. I think that geothermal will be part of that. I think hydrogen will be part of it. There's just going to be so many facets of this. Carbon capture and sequestration will be part of it. We think that small modular nuclear reactors may be part of it in the country. There's even capturing hydrogen or carbon dioxide from the air. People are talking about. I was reading a story today about carbon dioxide being injected into cement, and technology and science is doing its part. And we have a number of geothermal projects taking place in Canada. Out west, some of the abandoned well pads are being exploited in that way. Even in the little community I grew up in Piccadilly, we're looking at geothermal in an abandoned potash mine as a source of energy. So I think it's very much part of the mix, and really encourage people to explore any and all of these opportunities.
And then looking back to some more historic, the oil sector, of course, it's very important for Canada. And I remember Mr. Trudeau saying before he became prime minister, or just after, no other country in the world would have billions of dollars of assets in the ground in terms of oil sands and not try to obviously exploit it somehow. I mean, from an economic viability standpoint, how is traditional oil sector looking right now, and along with the renewable energies? I mean, is it an area that you'd say Irish companies might have are into providing services and products for the oil sector? Is it still a long-term bet?
Yeah, it's a very strong long-term bet. You may not have mentioned it, but I'm on the board of Canadian Natural Resources, and we would be Canada's largest producer of oil, largest producer of gas, and one of the largest E&P companies in the world. And we believe we'll be the last barrel standing, very simply. Our reserves are 50 years in duration. We don't have to put a lot of sustaining capital in to keep them that way. We're up against places like the Permian, where they have to re-drill every 6 months and put massive amounts of capital in. And we just keep knocking the cost down lower and lower. It's below cash cost of below $20 a barrel to produce at a time when oil is more than twice that. But the other thing that's really important, the Canadian energy companies, as a result of personal inclination, shareholder pressure, and also government intervention, are leading the world in environmental science. And Alberta is the largest environmental lab in the entire world. Thousands of scientists working on how to reduce emissions. So Canadians and other people in the world have got to realize it's not a binary choice between a clean planet and energy consumption. The two can co-mix and should for a long period of time. We need to harness the monies, the profits, if you like, from carbon producing companies in order to make the conversions to cleaner energy sources. And that's what we're doing in Canada. We're knocking down the use of water. We're knocking out the carbon dioxide intensity, and we're forced by market pressures, because in Canada we have a carbon tax, and so to remain competitive, we need to do that. So all I would say is that we need the science that is coming out of intensive sectors like the Canadian oil sector, that has got a high degree of sense of responsibility to deal with emissions. And I think if people could actually go to Alberta and look at what's being done, they'd be blown away at the science that's being applied. So people should look at green energy appropriately as a transition. And our traditional sources of energy, though, I think will remain a baseload energy for many decades to come, in a declining way, but still part of the mix. Therefore, we have to get it right. And I think the potential is there. And if Irish companies have technology and innovation to introduce, they'd be very, very welcome.
So, well, thank you. And again, I encourage people to throw in some questions to the chat. We've got a lot of bright lights on this call, and I can just see some of you thinking right now. Paul Genet, you have a smirk on your face like you're thinking about 1,000 questions. I might want to open it up. This comes from Susan Drysdale, who's the charge d'affaires here in Dublin, the acting ambassador. With Canada's close connection to the US, do you see an opportunity for Canada and Ireland to work together to help mend the transatlantic relationship? And by that, I think you mean with regards to the United States and Europe. Is that right, Suzanne? And then secondly to that, given the prevalence of the Irish roots in Atlantic Canada, do you have any suggestions for the Canadian Embassy to help with the creation of an Atlantic chapter of the Ireland Canada Chamber of Commerce? That's really getting you on the hook to make sure you're willing to speak at a dinner or something to get an Atlantic Chamber underway.
Well, the latter, it's easy. Obviously, we've got 20% of all of our provinces, maybe 27% of PI have Irish roots, so that would be easy. And we have these Irish days everywhere. The Miramichi, it's a week-long celebration of Irish culture with many exchanges. St. John has got an Irish dinner that Paul said, if he's on the call, will know very well. It's one of the most wild and raucous affairs I've ever been to, and they take great delight in throwing buns at the guest speaker. and I've happened to be the guest speaker on more than one occasion. So it's a great celebration. So yes, I would say Atlantic Canada would be fertile ground. And I think that Ireland and Canada have so many commonalities that that we could end up working together to be a bridge in solving some other issues. You know, both countries have a similarity. In Ireland, you've had decades of religious strife, and you've had a reconciliation process and a respect for people wherever they come from. And in Canada, we've learned to reach accommodation with our original founders, the First Nations, and French and English, and now a large multicultural component of our country. And so we're peacekeepers by definition, our two countries. And I think we could be very helpful to each other and dealing with some of our hot-headed neighbors on matters.
No doubt. Paul, did you have a question there?
I did indeed, and particularly after you had outed me, good friend Chris. Hi, Frank. It's really nice to see you and all the others on this. This is our new social life as well as our intellectual life, so we're making the most of it. Frank, it's wonderful to hear you, and particularly you're a balm for the soul. You're expansive, optimistic, humane, balanced, and generous view. It's been a rocky road the last number of years on the Canada-US front. I'd be remiss if I didn't mention that Power Corporation, of course, is the controlling shareholder of Irish Life through Great-West Life, and so we're very proud of that affiliation, and a great company. And Ireland is a wonderful market and base for Europe as well to have a presence in. If I could take you back to the Canada-US relationship, a piece of advice that you know, I received recently was in interacting with the Americans that, you know, we ought not to be immediately focused on transactional items, but really as the Americans sort of reboot their orientation towards the world, look at sort of big picture opportunities to collaborate, whether it be on climate change, you know, a smarter and balanced and managed trade approach. We do have a USMCA, which is an amazing feat by David McNaughton and the Liberal Trudeau team to get signed during that era. What would your advice be to you know, both the Canadian companies with a deep interest here and to Canadian, if I may, diplomats as we navigate things with Biden and with that framework of the USMCA? How do we make the most of this moment, enrich the relationship, and also you know, help drive trade and investment between the two of us?
Yeah, so Paul, it's pretty clear for Canada that managing the pandemic is job one, and I think the government is fully sees that. But historically, managing the Canada-US relationship is number two. 75% of our exports go there, probably 30+% of our GDP. So when you have that many eggs in one basket, you have to watch the basket very closely, and we do. It's a massive relationship. So I think both of the suggestions make sense to me, and that is that we create an overarching relationship based on some principle and a commonality of view on climate change, because Trudeau and Biden would be totally simpatico on the climate file, and we would be on the need for multilateralism and support for the WHO and all kinds of other things. But we can't avoid some transactional items because they come over the transom very quickly at us. And one of them is the Buy American clause that would be in stimulus packages. And we've successfully been able to get waivers in the past on that. And so we'll have to keep trying on that. Softwood lumber is a perennial debate. We can let it stew away. I think Canada will win that. All we really need is to get the WTO process booted up. But also we right now have a fight over Enbridge number 5, which is a major pipeline going through Michigan, and the Michigan governor is pledging to block it. And it not only supplies all of the propane for parts of Michigan, but it supplies refineries in Ontario and Quebec. So we've got some of these that we just can't avoid, these hot ground balls we have to deal with. But in the meantime, I'd love the idea of Canada and the United States just working on an overarching framework, not just for our relationship, but how we can guide the world to a more collaborative and peaceful place. Because right now it just seems like it's bigger than neighbor everywhere you look, and
Yes.
it should be like that. We're all better. We are all so much better when we lift each other up. And I want to close, Paul, with your excellent question by saying I'm really disturbed just in the last day or two at the kind of vaccination or vaccine snobbishness taking place and selfishness taking place, if I might say that. And when countries start saying it's mine and you can't have it, and the only people that lose in that are poor people in third world countries and other places around the planet. And if we ignore their needs, we're not going to solve this COVID problem either. So we're in this together, whether we like it or not. We are all in this together. And I'm hoping that under the US reasserted leadership now and WHO that we're able to get back to less selfishness.
Okay.
Thank you,
Thanks
Paul.
for your great comments.
Just back to a question from Philip, back to renewables. And this is, Philip, of course, is acting like a lawyer here. Of course, he is a lawyer. Is Brookfield interested in offshore wind in Ireland and the EU? The EU says it is an 800 billion euro project. Of course, if you agree, we can get a contract put in place right away. Perhaps you could get Paul Zed at McCarthy's to do some of the work for you, and we can see about getting it across the line.
Well, we're always interested. We're interested in Ireland. We're interested in wind. And we have a lot now. We would have, I think, probably 500 megawatts. We did end up selling some of our portfolio quite recently, but we also signed a deal with Facebook quite recently, and we're building a Tipperary wind farm. So the difficulty with Brookfield is that it's very dynamic. So we might have 1,000 megawatts of wind, and then we might sell that portfolio and start another project that would be solar based, or we could start a new wind operation. So it's hard to find a point in time and say, this is exactly what assets Brookfield has. It's a $600 billion company, and there's a lot of recycling of assets going on all the time. But are we interested in wind? It's central to our renewable agenda. And so, yeah, we're always interested in wind, and would look at anything for sure.
Perfect. Well, knowing Philip, I'm sure he'll have a proposal on your desk by tomorrow, or maybe Monday. Look, we have about 15 minutes left. I have a question here from Bahin at Air Canada. Mr. McKenna, working for Air Canada in Ireland, I hear regularly about difficulties that the necessary COVID-related restrictions on travel to Canada cause for personal and business travel. Despite the advances in technology, not all our business transactions in commerce can be effectively achieved remotely, with new business opportunities sometimes missed out without the personal touch. How do you think the current COVID-related travel restrictions are affecting and will affect trade and effective work functioning between Canada and the US, Canada and the rest of the world? And what measures can be taken on how to mitigate the downturn? What steps can be taken in the future to ramp up commerce once the pandemic is decreased to a level where corporate travel can start back up again? I suppose one way is that for Air Canada just to give free flights to everybody, Bahin, but I don't suppose that's going to work.
Look, I'm a big fan of Air Canada. It's my carrier. I used to be on the board of Air Canada before I became ambassador, and I love the service and the organization. So I'll declare myself. I think that we've erred on the side of excessive caution in many ways as a country, and I'm not advocating a wholesale opening of restrictions. I just think we have to manage the risk. We're not going to eliminate risk. We have to manage risk. And so I would be much more on the side of saying, look, let's keep travel open as much as it's possible. and let's use testing more extensively. And I've been party to travel where we're tested and cleared before we ever get on a plane, and then have to test within 2 or 3 days later with an instant test afterwards. So you get double security, and I think that gives you a high degree of confidence. And Canada, in my view, has not been quick to embrace some scientifically established testing that can be done extremely quickly. And as a result of that, we're really gridlocked, both within provinces and also internationally. So I would be on the side of the company or the country using science much more aggressively to protect us as citizens, but also to grease the wheels of international travel. Because at the end of the day, we just can't stay bottled up forever. We can't. We're going to lose world-class businesses, and people are going to get a COVID fatigue if they can't find outlets. So let's figure out how to do it safely. And I'm afraid that we err. I think this is being directed by bureaucrats who are very uninterested in any risk at all, and we're not thinking about how to get to yes. We're only thinking about how to get to no. So that'll earn me some criticisms from other people, but I read and watch the science of testing and what's taking place everywhere around the world, and there are countries that have done it much better than we have.
Thank you. So one question from Deirdre Giblin, who is our vice chair. Not to put you on the spot or anything, this is a tough one. Mr. McKenna, with your knowledge of both Canada and Ireland, what, in your view, is the single biggest opportunity for both countries to work together from a trade perspective? This is a pass-fail.
Yeah. Well, you know, there's a huge amount of interest in Canada and Ireland. Ireland's business success is well known. Kevin Vickers in New Brunswick virtually ran on a platform of bringing Ireland to New Brunswick. It was amazing. I think that we can be, Canada can be investing more in Ireland. It's a great disembarkation point to Europe. It's a country where we've got an affinity of the things we've talked about before: language and legal system, taxation system, so on. And so it represents a great jumping off point for Canadian companies. So I think that side of the trade just makes total sense. And for Ireland, Canada is a great jumping off point to get into the US market. With our unrestricted free trade to the United States, Canada in many ways can be an easier place to set up business and use that as the footprint to take all across North America. So I think we got some great opportunities between the two countries. There's just so much like-mindedness that makes it easy to do business.
All right, thank you. So I think we'll probably leave with this next question. Now this might be a bit specific as well, but we'll see how we go. From Brian Hayes, the CETA EU trade deal is pretty much what the UK has now with the EU post-Brexit. The UK now wants an MOU with the EU on financial services. Do you see how much opportunity to do more on the EU-Canada financial services agenda, something that the US was always slow to consider and hard to see a revamped TTIP on the table anytime soon?
Yeah, there's a lot of things in there to unpack. To start with, I just openly disclose I thought Brexit was a mistake, in my view. A lot of people in the call may disagree, number one. Number two, all the pain is not out of this trade at the present time, and financial services virtually haven't been dealt with. And I predict that Europe is going to continue to put a lot of pressure to move jobs out of the UK. There has not been an equivalence agreement negotiated as of yet. I think places like Dublin and Frankfurt and Paris are going to want to have a lot more critical mass of jobs. And when they have more critical mass, they automatically are going to be a bigger competitor to London. I think that Canada wants to be, we want a foot in both of our traditional markets, the UK, that we have a trading relationship with, and also with Europe, and we do through CETA and through the UK-Canada continuation agreement. I don't know that. I don't know how this will all turn out, but at some point, financial services is going to settle down to a jurisdiction that's accommodating, and that jurisdiction is going to be a big winner in all the dislocation that's taking place.
Look at that. I mean, I just want to say again, Mr. McKenna, thank you so much for joining us today. These when you're on point like this and on questions for an hour or so, it can be taxing. We know we have to give you a bit of a break because we've arranged for an interview with the Sunday Business Post in about an hour's time. So we want to make sure you have a coffee and wet your whistle. Make sure you're ready for that. Normally, when we have a VIP high-level speaker like yourself, we would present you with a gift. We would present you with some water for Crystal, or perhaps some Irish whiskey. We can't right now do that, obviously. But let me just say that watch your postage, and we'll make sure we get something on your way. And might I just say, when things do settle down, please know that you're always welcome here as a guest of the ICBA. We'd love to build another event around you in person. And it just, again, thank you for your time.
Well, I've enjoyed it. I just feel a great sense of closeness with the country and with the people involved, and I look forward to visiting our offices in Dublin as soon as we can. That's going to be a great joy for me because I was involved in the decision making on that going back a long time. So that'll be fun.
Well, can I tell you, they're beautiful offices and they have a lovely patio. And so we look forward to Kevin Ahern, MD, hosting us for a nice reception out there post-COVID, perhaps when you arrange. I should note, our media consultant, Patrick Hawkey, just wanted to correct me, say it's the Sunday Independent. It's not the Sunday Business Post. I'm sorry. You'll be interviewed. So look, everybody, thank you very much for your time. Mr. McKenna, thank you once again. And we'll hope to see you soon.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you all.
Thanks indeed. Well done, Chris.
Thanks.